What a gorgeous morning it is. It's so beautiful. I've been wandering around looking at melting frost on lichen and things like that. Yes. Right, so you'll notice we have a different figure on the shrine this morning. So as well as our Amida turning and calling us to the Pure Land, beneath Amida we've got Maitreya. Okay, so Maitreya is my Yidam. So yeah, in a way, I suppose it's like, how does the unconditioned call to us? How does the unconditioned image itself and present with different colour or form or quality? How does that present for us? And when you find that connection, just honour it, because it's so precious, so precious. Yeah. So generally, people don't know anything about Maitreya, or very little. So we've got this really gorgeous rupa, which you probably can't see terribly well, and it was actually made for me as a present by Annie Ferris from Aberystwyth. Now, Maitreya, he's the Buddha of the future, but that means our potential. So he's like our potential to become enlightened. We are the Buddhas of the future. And he is the Bodhisattva of Metta, of Mahamaitri. What could be better than that? So he's described as like a young king, and he's seated on a throne with lions, these great white lions, like sort of Trafalgar Square lions. And they're roaring and they're holding his throne. And you can see actually there's a relationship with Varochana there. It's like, it's like Maitreya is sort of a reflex of Varochana kind of in the world. And he's on this throne because he is right in the middle of the world. Like nothing could be closer to us than our Metta. And he's also described as rising like the dawn sun against mountains. So we've had this theme about Amitabha as measureless light stretching in all directions, Varochana as the illuminator, illuminating all of space and time. And then we have Maitreya, who's kind of like, Maitreya steps into our realm. It's like he steps out of the archetypal world into our realm. And he's described as rising like the dawn sun against mountains. It's like everything's dark, it's cold, it's miserable, we're lost, we don't know where to go. And then the dawn sun rises and it brings warmth and light. We feel it on our faces, we feel it on our skin, we can see the path. And, this is mythically how Maitreya is manifesting. We don't know where to go. Metta arises and we know where to go. And he's also in the Vajra family. So you might think, being the Bodhisattva of Metta, he's either in the Vajra family or Varochana's family, the Buddha wisdom family. And you might think he wouldn't be, he'd be in Amitabha's Metta family, but he's not. And it's this thing about the dawn is a time of clarity. The air is crystal clear. You can see everything and you can see how beautiful everything is. And actually, when there's no obscuration, actually our hearts just love. It's natural. We don't have to manufacture it. Okay, so now we are going to salute the three jewels in the person of Maitreya and Amida. And then, as usual, I shall read today's sections of the Tanisho and we'll chant to Maitreya and sit for a few minutes. in unison. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dhammaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Namah. Om Ha Hum. So we'll be doing a puja to Maitreya tonight, puja to Metta as well. And tomorrow night we'll be doing a puja to Amitabha, just to let you know where that's going. Tanisho 3. Even the good person attains birth in the Pure Land. How much more so the evil person? But the people of the world constantly say, even the evil person attains birth. How much more so the good person? Although this appears to be sound at first glance, it goes against the intention of the primal vow of other power. The reason is that since the person of self-power, being conscious of doing good, lacks the thought of entrusting the self completely to other power, he or she is not the focus of the primal vow of Amida. But when self-power is turned over and entrusting to other power occurs, the person attains birth in the land of true fulfillment. The primal vow was established out of deep compassion for us who cannot become freed from the bondage of birth and death through any religious practice, due to the abundance of blind passion. Since its basic intention is to effect the enlightenment of such an evil one, the evil person who is led to true entrusting by other power is the person who attains birth in the Pure Land. Thus, even the good person attains birth. How much more so the evil person? From Tanisho 8. Some people say that those who do not fear committing evil because of the inconceivable power of Amida's vow are guilty of taking pride in the primal vow, and therefore will not attain birth. This betrays doubt in the primal vow and shows a lack of understanding of good and evil as the product of past karma. Good thoughts arise in our minds due to the effect of past good, and we are made to think and do evil because of the working of karmic evil. The late Master said, "We should know that even as trifling a thing as the speck of dust on the tip of a rabbit's hair or a sheep's fleece is the product of past evil karma." The gist of this statement is that when we think good thoughts, we think we are good. And when we think evil thoughts, we think we are evil. not realizing fully that it is not these thoughts, but the inconceivable power of the vow that makes our salvation possible. From Tanisho 16. Once true entrusting is settled, we realize that our birth is due to the working of Amida and not to our calculations. Even though we may do evil, even more should we think about the power of the vow. Then tenderness and forbearance will appear by virtue of made to become so by itself. Maitri, Maitri, Maitri Swaha. 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 Okay. So the area we're looking at today is the area of Shinran and ethics. And so, as you will have heard in that piece, well, basically, the Pure Land attitude to ethics is it's probably the area that makes this school so controversial, and I must say, I mean, personally, I feel it's misunderstandings of what Shinran is saying about this area, but those misunderstandings, they caused Shinran immense difficulty in his lifetime, and then they carried on causing difficulty, kind of like, I imagine, sort of through the centuries. So if you listen to those verses of the Tanisho, again, you would think Shinran is taking the basic, the basic, most fundamental Dharma and throwing it out of the window. So he's saying the good person isn't going to, the good person can get born in the Pure Land, but actually the primal vow is aimed at the evil person. So we have this evil word again, so there's immense reactivity potential around that. And actually it's this sort of bad, evil person that is going to get born in the Pure Land. Okay, how are we going to understand that? And then in Tanisho 13, he's saying, all good and evil that arises is a result of past karma. Okay, now the Buddha gets asked that question, is everything that happens to us the result of karma? And the Buddha says, no. Okay, the Buddha says, no, it could be that, or it could be different sorts of conditionality, like it could be to do with the wind element or the phlegm element, and he gives a load of examples. And then later on, you get the teaching of the 5 niyamas, and then of course Bhante has drawn that out quite extensively for us. So one of the things we'll be exploring, well, what's Shinran getting at? Because there is something important in what he's saying. So what is it? Is he just advocating fatalism? I don't think so. Yes. So please don't go away from this retreat thinking that you need to throw the precepts out of the window, and Maitre Siddhi has said that ethics isn't important. Ethics, actually, I'm very, very interested in, and I have run retreats on it at Taraloka. And in fact, like Leela Mati said, we were going to be, that was the retreat we were going to be running, was one on ethics. Yes. So Shinran himself had problems with what got called licensed evil. So this was people encountering, either from Honen or Shinran or other Pure Land devotees, this teaching that you do not need to practice ethics to get to the Pure Land, and it's aimed at people who aren't able to be ethical. And so you get people kind of going, oh, well, if it's aimed at people who do bad things, I'm going to go out and do a whole load of bad things, and then I'm going to be reborn in the Pure Land. And this was called licensed evil. Okay, and you can see why this was just immensely problematic in terms of like society, and why why Pure Land ended up being suppressed at various points. But what Shinran says is, he says, do not take poison just because there is an antidote. Okay, so he's really not saying ethics don't matter, and we'll see later on in this talk what it is he is getting at. But he's very clear: do not take poison just because there is an antidote. Right. So let's take this from the start. So probably the first thing to unpack a little is what is Shinran meaning by the evil person? Okay, so this is translating akunin. Now, when we hear the term evil, I think we're hearing it in a kind of Judeo-Christian sense that is in our culture. So it means inherently bad, sort of like wicked in itself. And it's a sort of permanent, fixed nature of malice or malevolence. And then this gets embodied in the idea of original sin. Okay, so then we can have a sense that like somehow inside us we're just bad. Okay, this is not what Shinran is getting at. Okay, so just kind of go, right, okay, this is one, this is what we kind of think evil is. He's not meaning that. Okay, when you're reading the Tanisho, if you just need to replace the term evil with something else, like it could be foolish or unenlightened or unskillful, like just do that if evil doesn't work for you. I like extreme, so personally I like evil, but there you go. Yeah, so Shinran's defining an evil person as someone who is spiritually ignorant. So he says, filled with karmic evil and burning with blind passion. But this is in the context of the Buddhist perspective that all beings are by nature pure. So they're like blue sky, pure blue sky. And sometimes, this is Shantideva's metaphor, sometimes that blue sky gets obscured by acrid smoke, like farmers burning tractor tyres or something like that. But actually, their essential nature is pure and beautiful and of the nature of love and connection. So when he's using this term akunin or evil person, he's coming from that perspective, okay? And we need to be hearing it in that way as well. But I think where I like it that he uses the word evil, and the reason that I like it is there's something about he's talking about this area about someone who has past karma, whose behaviour is driven by old habits and patterns, and actually like they can't just not do it. They can't just wake up in the morning and go, I don't want to be that sort of a person. And I have that in me. Like I have patterns that just happen and I can't change them. Over time, I can change them. But as they arise in that moment, I can't stop that anxiety arising. I can't stop that, I get triggered by something that, some deep conditioning from my childhood. I am reacting. And in that moment, there is absolutely nothing that I can do to change that. And then I look out at the world and I see, some people doing fantastic things in the world and just a lot of suffering, misunderstanding, people behaving in ways that really harm other people. And instead of thinking other, this teaching of the evil person, I think, oh, I have the seeds of that behaviour in me. And if I had certain conditioning, I too would be behaving like that. In a way, we don't get to choose the person that we are, and we don't kind of, in that sense, we don't get to choose where we were brought up, what happened to us. And the person that we are now hasn't chosen our past karma. Like okay, there's a sense where we have chosen our personalities, but there's another sense where like me at this moment, I haven't chosen, I've got a real tendency towards irritability and snappiness. I didn't wake up in the morning and think, oh, what a marvellous idea. I want to be an irritable, snappy person. It's like there's a lot that is just arising. So when Shinran is talking about the evil person, and I'm looking out at the world, it's like I feel this sense of solidarity, and I think, oh yeah, and I'm just like them. It's not like I'm good and they're bad. Oh, if they just did this, because I know the way it should be. And it softens everything, and it brings me into a sense of connection and forgiveness. So another aspect of him using this term evil person was that a kunin in medieval Japan didn't just mean wrongdoers, but it also meant various outcast groups. So like people who made their living by handling the dead, or preparing meat or leather, or sort of slaughterhouse workers. And it wasn't that the Buddhists were vegetarian. They all ate fish and meat, but it was just not okay to be a person engaged in that trade. So there's a sort of deep hypocrisy there. And those people, it's like they weren't even allowed to enter the temples, let alone have any part in religious life. So Shinran's saying, no, the primal vow is for everyone. It's not just for if you are part of a privileged part of society. So this is another aspect of how he's using this term, evil person. It means all of us, like everyone. And this is why you get, all the geishas, the prostitutes becoming Pure Land practitioners. And also there was a sort of serf or slave class that was sort of passed down families as possessions, and they become Pure Land monks and nuns and priests. And, so it's got this whole kind of like social revolutionary aspect to it. So hopefully that gives you a bit more of a perspective of where Shinran's coming from, where he keeps using this term, the evil person. So as well, so we've got Shinran proposing this radical turnaround where, so we assume that we meet the Dharma, and before that we're sort of going along with like whatever ethical path we have, and then we meet the precepts and we think, aha, this matches. Quite often we think this matches, or else we think, this doesn't match, I need to change how I behave. And we practice ethics, and this aligns us with reality, and it's a really, really fundamental, important part of practice. And here's Shinran saying, no, you don't need to practice ethics. The good person isn't, the primal vow isn't aimed at the good person. And why is this? The reason is that since the person of self-power, being conscious of doing good, lacks the thought of entrusting the self completely to other power, he or she is not the focus of the primal vow of Amida. Okay, so there's a couple of ways of looking at this. So first of all, this is common to the whole of the Buddhist tradition, that no amount of ethical behaviour will by itself result in enlightenment. So it can result in us having a happier rebirth, and it can result in a much, much smoother life in samsara. But by itself, that won't break us out of a dichotomy of like me in here and other world out there. Ethics by itself does not produce insight. So little quote from Revering and Relying on the Dharma. So this is Subhuti and Bhante. Although the idea of self is essential if one is to work with the progressive trend in the Dharma, in the karma niyama, so what he means by that is you need a sense of self to practice ethics. Back to the quote. It is simply an idea. The idea of self is simply an idea, limited and ultimately limiting. We must give it up so that a new order or conditionality may take over. So what this is saying is like practicing the precepts requires us to think there's a self in here that has agency, that can make choices and affect things out there in ourselves. And it's like, it's not that that's wrong, it's just that it's limited, okay? So what Shinran's pointing to is, and that has to break down. that assumption of a fixed self has to break down. So what's interesting about this is you could say that the practice of the precepts is us aligning ourselves with reality, us aligning ourselves with how things are. So you could say that all our ethical practice, what we're aiming for with that is receptivity to Amida. Okay? But then something else has to happen. So Shinran's saying, well, the person of self-power is conscious of doing good. So it's like there's a way we can practice ethics in a way that bolsters up our sense of self. And just to say, I don't know how much this is, what do I want to say? What I want to say is, I think it's inevitable. I think it's absolutely inevitable. And then something else comes in. And we just need to be aware that something else can come in. So Shinran's point is, if we believe that we can produce enlightenment by our own efforts, by being really, really ethical, we won't be able to let go and entrust to Amida's vow or Dharma Niyama processes in our life. And actually, I thought Leela Matty's personal talk last night, she touched on that, where she was talking about how in her ordination process, she was going for refuge to ethics. Like, if we get everything right and we do everything really, really perfectly, then that's going to get us ordained or enlightened. And it's not that practicing ethics isn't a marvelous thing to do, but actually that kind of like, I'll be a good person if I do it like this, and I won't be a good person if I don't do it like that. And that is a hindrance. That is a hindrance. So if we're successful and we're doing everything right, it bolsters our sense of self, because we can think, oh, I'm a good person. I'm a good person. And people will be pleased with me. And look, I washed up all the cups. There were 35 cups left after Sangha night. And did anybody else help? No, they might have dried up for 10 minutes, but there I was washing up the cups. It's like we're really identifying with our mind and our behaviour. It means something essential about me. I am the good person who washed up the cups. Okay? So this is the sort of thing that Shinran is talking about. And if we're unsuccessful, so we're kind of like, we're not managing to be the good person who washes up the cups, or we sort of fall into the bad person who, I don't know, maybe we just get into a really intractable, grumpy state, or we just find ourselves really, really anxious one morning. And we just can't seem to respond differently, no matter how we try. I had this situation with somebody that I lived with, and actually I feel very fond of her, but basically I snapped at her for 9 years. I lived with her for 9 years, and I bit her head off for 9 years. And all I could do, it's like I just couldn't not do it. I just kept on having to go, I'm so sorry, I've done it again. I'm so sorry, I've done it again. Anyway. Yeah, so there we are. We've been trying to practice the 4 right efforts. We're doing the metta bhavana. We're doing the mindfulness of breathing. We're trying to practice the precepts. I've bitten her head off again. And then we just get this sense of failure. Like, I can't do it. And I think the further you go on in your spiritual life, it's like the stronger that sense of failure can get. Like, oh, I'm about to be ordained and I've done that thing again, or I've got in a state again. Oh, but I've been ordained for 7 years and I'm just in that complete state again. And I can imagine it's just going to carry on. Yeah, so, and I think I really relate to this because, Well, each of us just have different personalities and temperaments, and some people, I think, are more integrated and have a bit of a sort of smoother ride, and think, progress can feel more steady. And actually, the danger for that sort of personality is complacency and settling down. But I am not of that type, so this is why I relate to this so strongly. Like, I feel like my mind is like trying to ride a bucking bronco, and you get to the mindfulness of breathing, the metta bhavana, it's going to do this, and you're going to have all these effects, and I can wake up in the morning and my mind can be doing anything, and then it's just like, okay, what can I do that is most creative with this unmanageable mental state at this moment? So I get quite a strong sense of feeling like I don't have control over my mind, and how can I relate to that? Either I can take it personally, I can think I'm a failure, I can't practice the Dharma, I'm not good enough. Or I can think I am a being of karmic evil, filled with blind passions, and so is everybody else, and that's okay, and that's okay. And I go for refuge to the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha, and I try again. So there's a lovely bit from Reggie Ray. Now, I've written down the page number and not the book, but I think it's probably Indestructible Truth. So I read this and I just thought, yes, this matches my experience. He says, the path of meditation is challenging, for it mostly consists of seeing through our own posturing and pride, unravelling our self-deception, and recovering dimensions of our person that, because of the pain cloaking them, we ignore and repress. Those who devote themselves to a life of meditation often find themselves face to face with the most difficult of emotional upheavals and egoic inflations and deflations as their awareness grows and they integrate more of what they are in their totality. This vivid and often excruciating process is itself a manifestation of the Buddha nature. So we can just notice, we can just get into such a soap opera of the self. Like, oh yes, everything's going marvelously, and I'm being really good, and everything's going great, and it's really fantastic, and oh no, and I failed, and this has happened again. And what we're doing is we're making our small, limited, and contingent mental states way more important than they need to be. We're doing a big drama of the self. It's like EastEnders. There's got to be some sort of like emotional crisis or some, it's like there's got to be some sort of drama going on. So this soap opera of the self, it's underpinned by these emotionally held views. First, the self is good or bad. So we are ultimately good or ultimately bad. And that our current mental state or our current set of actions says something fundamental and essential about who and what we are. Okay, now this is a wrong view. We need to turn to this essential nature of as blue sky, us and others and world. Another wrong view might be the goal of the Dharma life is to be consistently good. Well, we've just had that reading from Reggie Ray where basically he's talking about integration, the first of Bhante's stages in the system of spiritual life. And the third view is that we are our behaviour and habits. So we should be under our own control. Self should be under our own control. Okay, so in the survey, I like the survey, you can probably tell. There's a bit where Banti talks about the two aspects of noumenal belief. And what he means by noumenal belief is belief in fixed and separate selves. And he talks about nisata, no own being. And that's like we can be divided up into like all our different bits, and it goes down to molecules and atoms and quantum particles, but actually you never get a final atom. Everything is flow, everything is a compounded phenomena. So that's one aspect of believing in a separate self. And the other aspect of believing in a fixed and separate self is nijivita. Now, I really like this. Nijivita means not believing that we are the source of our own life energy. Now, we might think, well, of course we don't think that. But actually, it's this whole area of control. Do we believe that we are under our own control? This often shows up when we get ill. Do we believe that our body should be under our control and it's somehow our fault? Do we believe that our mind is ours and it should completely be under our control? So, and of course, there's different ways of looking at it. It's like, which side do we focus on? What we can choose and what we can change, or what we don't choose and what we can't change? So it's quite interesting looking at the Pali Canon and what the Buddha says, because actually there are different perspectives, and it's like, which perspective are we going to find it helpful to take up? So there is the great Buddhist teaching of the 12 Nidanas, and we've got the gap, the point of freedom. So this is what you're likely to meet in any Triratna centre when you first come along to a newcomer's class. So the gap, the fact that we have Vedana, pleasant, unpleasant or neutral experience. And then it goes straight into craving or aversion, like habitual patterns of pushing and pulling. And between those two links is the gap. We can feel the pleasant, unpleasant or neutral sensation. We can use our self-agency and we can make a conscious choice. We can choose awareness, we can choose kindness. We can't choose what presents, we can choose our response, okay? So this comes from the Pali Canon. And this is a really, really helpful teaching, and we are not trying to discount it, okay? On the other hand, we're going to, so there's this sutta which actually you've had in your study material called the Discourse on No Self. So in theory, this is the second teaching the Buddha ever gave. So he's gone to Sarnath, he's gone to find the 5 ascetics who were his old companions. And they sort of think, oh no, it's the Buddha. Well, we'll welcome him for old time's sake, but we're not going to kind of stand up or respect him. And then they can't help themselves. Like his whole presence means they have to stand up and respect him. And he says, look, folks, I found it. And they're like, no, surely not. Yes, I have. I found it. And his first teaching, now, I think it probably wasn't like this because it's all in neat lists. And I don't think he just got enlightened and had neat lists at that point. But, you know, as this has come down to us in the tradition, his first teaching is the 4 Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. And when he finishes that, you've got the Kondanya nose. You know, he looks across at Kondanya and he says, Kondanya knows, Kondanya knows. He has broken out of selfhood and he has seen this nature of conditionality and flow, which is his nature, the nature of all beings. And that's such a significant moment because it means the Dharma can be shared. And then the second teaching after that, and it's just lovely that, like, they can't bear to stop talking about the Dharma, so just like one of them has to go off and get some food because, like, but the rest can't, you know, they can't bear not to carry on talking about, like, this amazing, they're like, no way. So then we've got the second teaching of the Buddha. Now, I'm going to read this out to you. Now, just to say, like, he's talking about the 5 skandhas, just to give you the clue to the list that he's going through. Bhikkhus, material form is not self. If form were self, this form would not lead to affliction, and it could be had of form. Let my form be thus. Let my form not be thus. And it is because form is not self that it therefore leads to affliction, and that it cannot be had of form. Let my form be thus. Let my form not be thus. And then he goes through the same verse with Vedana. Can we control our Vedana? Can we say, no, I don't want that Vedana? Yep, I'm going to change that Vedana. We can't. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, it just arises. The same with interpretation. Sanya, recognizing, labeling, naming, interpreting. It's just happening. Can we make that happen or not happen? Can we choose in the moment? No, it's just happening. Sanskaras. So here we go. Sanskaras, volitional formations, our deep habits of wanting, not wanting, emotional, behavioural patterns. And he says the same verse. Sanskaras are not self. If sanskaras were self, they would not lead to affliction. And it could be had of sanskaras. Let my sanskaras be thus. Let my sanskaras not be thus. And it is because they are not self that they therefore lead to affliction or suffering. And it cannot be had of our sanskaras. Let my sanskaras be thus. Let my sanskaras not be thus. So the Buddha is saying, we cannot choose what our sanskaras are. They arise in that moment. We are not in control. There's not a self that is in control here. And then the same for consciousness or vijnana. Our consciousness is divided. We perceive in terms of me in here and you out there. We're not choosing that. That is arising. Okay, I could get excited about the whole rest of that sutta, but we've probably taken the main point from it, so I'd probably better not. So you could say that the Buddha's putting it like that, and Shinran is saying, good thoughts arise in our minds due to the effect of past good, and we are made to think and do evil because of the working of karmic evil. So do you see how, like, Shinran is actually saying the same thing as the No Self Sutta? Now, of course, what we're talking about here is the difference between karma and karma vipaka, okay? So karma vipaka, the fruit of past action, if we have been rolling on in endless life after life after life, how do we know? It's just like this sort of, these volitional formations, this sort of snowdrift of our personality and emotional habits. We have not chosen that. And that is vipaka. That is what just arises in the moment. And then we have fresh karma, which is what do we choose to act out now? But we don't have, how much choice and agency do we have? Because, there definitely is agency. It's like we can make creative choices. But it's more like a question of what is the most creative thing we can do? Because, if you're just, I just got into a total rage. I got really triggered by something that wasn't actually to do with the scenario, but it was kind of like a deep conditioning thing being triggered. And what I wanted to do was go and punch this person. And what I did do was go for a run. So it's like, there was no way I could work with my mind. It was absolutely overwhelming. I just had this sort of total physical response. But I didn't go and punch that person. I went for a run. So it's more like kind of going, what is the best choice we can make at this moment? And then bringing a sense of forgiveness to, oh yeah, I am a conditioned being. And that was a really overwhelming samskara that got triggered. Golly, that's painful. That, it's really painful to be in the grip of unskillful, difficult samskaras. So I think the point here is which, in any situation, which is the one we need to focus on? Do we need to think, actually, do you know what? I really need to make choices here. I really need to kind of try and set up better conditions so that I get less snappy in this situation, or that I really need to resolve not to just casually speak unpleasantly about that person, So it's like there really is a place for that. There really is a place for that. But what happens when we take the perspective of karma vipaka and we just bring this sense of forgiveness to ourselves and also to others when they behave in really difficult ways? And when the Sangha behaves in very difficult ways, Sangha anger, it's a really big thing. And yet, everyone in the Sangha has their own conditioning, has their own past which arises. If we bring forgiveness to ourselves, can we bring forgiveness to them as well? I end up having this image of the moon. So when we look up at the night sky, we see the portion of the moon that is lit up. And, actually it's nearly full at the moment. Really been looking at it on these crisp nights. But we see, maybe we see a crescent, and what we look at is the crescent of the moon. And that's like the bright side, which is, I can change, I can choose. By my choices, I can determine how my mind re-arises in the future. And it's not like that's not true, but it's like the bright crescent of the moon. And then there's the dark side of the moon. There's the slice of the moon that we don't see. And that's like, and there is these weight of deep conditioning, and that is not under our conscious control, and there is nothing we can do to make it not be there. But to get the full picture, to see the whole of the moon and to understand the nature of moon, we need to see the dark side and we need to see the bright side. So what's the effect of focusing on the dark side, like seeing what just arises, what we can't choose? We stop taking ourselves so personally. We just stop buying into the drama of me. It's just like, oh, look, this is arising. Oh, yeah, I do get into that, don't I? But we stop feeding it. We stop kind of getting into this, like trying to make ourselves a good person and kind of go, oh, I'm not a good person. It's really terrible. We just don't buy into that drama. I tell you, it's such a relief not to buy into that drama. It's like there's a deep stepping back. And this is insight. This is insight level. Like Shinran is always coming from an insight perspective. Which is why he's so easy to misunderstand, because what we're doing is we're taking a perspective of conditionality. We are seeing bare phenomena rolling on, dependent on conditions all, and that includes our minds. Now, Shinran does have a suggestion about what we do when unethical behaviour starts erupting in us. So what he says is, even though we may do evil, even more should we think about the power of the vow. Then tenderness and forbearance will appear by virtue of made to become so by itself. So Shinran's only ever got one practice or one suggestion, okay? It's like we turn towards ourselves with forgiveness as deluded finite beings. And from that place, we turn towards the Buddha, the enlightened mind that is embodying complete compassion and sees conditionality and sees how things happen. And actually, the mind that turns towards the Buddha, so remember back to the first day in Mahanama, the mind that turns towards the Buddha, actually that mind calms and releases and relaxes. And so this is where Shinran is talking about naturalness, jinen, or made to become so by itself. It's like if we just bring this sense of like, oh, here I am, finite, flawed, conditioned, limited, and I bring myself into relation to this potential, this possibility, and this power in the universe. Actually, tenderness and forbearance appear by the power of made to become so by itself. We're not practicing ethics in terms of trying to follow the precepts, but by turning towards the Buddha and turning towards ourselves, actually that has a deep effect on our psyche. So we've got this one practice of entrusting. And Bhante also has this one central act, going for refuge. So I'm just going to finish with Bhante. So he's talking about working with the antidotes and working with our minds. But what if these 4 standard methods of eradicating arisen unskillful mental thoughts fail? Sometimes it may happen that even when you grit your teeth and try to suppress it, the unskillful thought simply will not go away. Like grass, when the foot that was crushing it moves on, it springs up again as soon as the pressure is removed. When that happens, what can one do? Can one in fact do anything at all? If you are operating within a purely psychological context, there is nothing whatever you can do. But if you are operating within a religious or spiritual, in this case a Buddhist context, there is one final thing that you can do. We are told by the great masters of the spiritual life that if all these methods fail, and if, however hard you try, you cannot get rid of the hindrances, then the only thing left to do is to go for refuge to the Buddha, together with your failure, and just let the matter rest there. So that's like Shinran saying, once true entrusting is settled, we realize our birth is due to the working of Amida and not to our calculations. We are stepping out of ethics practiced in a psychological context, and we are stepping into a full Dharma perspective of infinite compassion.